Politics, BC Legislature. David Moscrop, political scientist over at SFU. Welcome back. We officially had the introduction of the non-confidence motion from NDP leader John Horgan yesterday. What do you believe happens today? Does Christy Clark, Liberal leader and current Premier, walk in and ask for a snap election given what is happening?
I think she might. You know, she said she wasn't going to, and she doesn't want to own the fact that she's going to, but she also doesn't want the NDP to govern. She wants another crack at an election. The Liberals have a lot more money than the NDP. They're ahead in the poll that I saw this morning, so they have every incentive to want one, and so I think Clark's going to try to ask the LG for an election. I mean, in a fairly sort of circuitous way, let's say, even in a cynical way, but I think she's going to go for it.
Well, it's a very interesting time now because there's questions being asked of what is going to happen next, and with the introduction of this non-confidence motion, we're looking at NDP leader John Horgan, his ability to govern with the current setup of legislature should it sway the way of forming an NDP government here. How limited will he truly be?
Well, I think quite limited. You know, at the end of the day, the confidence vote today is going to go 44-42 in the NDP's favor. That's going to happen. That said, the LG, if Clark is asking for an election, is going to look and say, you know, can this legislature work? Is it going to be stable, yes or no? And it sort of looks like it may not be particularly stable because, you know, it's 43-43 by the time you have a speaker, and that's just not a recipe for lasting. And I still believe it's appropriate that the NDP have a chance to govern, because why not see if it works rather than force folks back into a summer election? You know, give them a shot. They have a majority. See if they can do it. But I don't think they'll get a ton done if they do. And I think we'll be doing this again, the election, that is to say, you know, 6 to 18 months from now.
Well, it's an important decision now for the lieutenant governor to look at the aspect of NDP forms government or call this snap election. What are the key factors going through the head of Judith Guichon to say, all right, here's what's going to be best for this province?
Well, the LG has a few responsibilities. She has to have a premier, which she has for the moment, Christy Clark, and she has to make sure the legislature is functioning. So she's going to look at the legislature and say, look, if I let Horgan and Weaver do their thing, is it going to be functional long enough that, you know, I can justify letting them go? And that's going to be a tough call for her, because Christy Clark has been trying to make the case publicly and otherwise that it's not going to work, that it's going to fall apart. It's going to be a disaster. It's going to get nothing done. So Guichon's looking at this and thinking, well, you know, can they get anything done? Is it worth it? And I'd imagine she's looking and thinking, well, you know, if it's going to last for 6 months or for a year, it's worth letting them have a shot at it. And I think that's the appropriate you know, approach for her to take, and I think at the end of the day, that's probably what she's still going to do. Because at the end of the day, if she gives them a chance and they fail, that's fine, we have an election, but why jump the gun and go right to an election? You don't need to.
What is the precedent for this type of thing in our province to say, hey, if they choose a snap election, how quickly we could actually see an election take place once again in the province? Well,
so if the legislature is dissolved, my understanding is that the election writs will be issued at the same time. So if she dissolves on, say, Friday or Monday, you know, that would be the election call. And the Elections Act in BC stipulates that the vote will be 28 days from the writs. So, you know, basically 28 days from Monday or even Friday, you can see that we have an election. At least that's my reading of it. So, you know, a snap election, we could be at this very, very soon.
And what do you think overall is flawed with the system to allow us to get in this place where we had an election early May and we're still going back and forth to decide the future?
I mean, I'm a big fan of the Westminster system. I think it's the best system in the world, but it's based on conventions. And conventions are basically just ways of doing things that we've all agreed upon and that are part of the Constitution. Excuse me. But they're not enforceable by the courts. So they require everyone to behave and to act in good faith. And I think Christy Clark has not been doing that. I think she's been pushing back on the conventions. She's been acting really cynically and is doing a lot of damage to the institutions and even to our Constitution potentially. You know, because at the end of the day, our system requires that politicians act in the interest of the public to a certain extent and behave themselves. I don't think she's been doing that.
Well, strategy's been in play. We also heard about the $2.8 billion surplus for the government over the past year, so plenty more to talk about. Hopefully you'll be joining us to come back on to dissect it all. Thanks again for coming by, David.
My pleasure.